Picture a cold, flat marshland under a bruised sky, where wind worries the reeds and the churchyard stones look like they're trying to sink back into the earth. That's where Pip begins, a poor orphan with muddy shoes, a tender conscience, and a heart that startles easily. Great Expectations opens with fear, raw, animal fear, because Dickens wants you to feel how a life can be shaped by a single terrifying encounter. Right away, Dickens frames fear not as a moment, but as a force that can steer a whole life. The encounter is instant legend. A starving escaped convict erupts out of the graves like a ghost with teeth, seizes Pip, and demands food and a file. Pip steals from his fierce sister, Mrs. Joe, and her gentle husband, Joe Golgry the village blacksmith, then trembles with guilt as if the marsh itself is watching. From the start, Dickens ties morality to atmosphere. The fog isn't just weather, it's the moral confusion Pip is about to live inside. That fog is the story's first signal that Pip will spend years unable to see himself clearly. Soldiers arrive, the convict is captured, and something strange happens. Instead of condemning Pip, the convict protects him, taking the blame for the theft. Pip feels relief, but also an unsettling connection. Mercy enters the story disguised as menace, and Dickens plants one of the novel's biggest questions: who is truly criminal, the man in chains, or the society that made him? Dickens makes the villain act with tenderness so you question every easy label afterward. Pip grows under the hard roof of his sister's house, where love is scarce and punishment is loud. Joe is the warm light in the room, patient, loyal, quietly brave. Pip loves Joe, yet he also begins to feel the first itch of shame about poverty, rough hands, coarse manners. That shame is the seed of his expectations, and Dickens treats it like a sickness that can spread through a good heart. Pip's hunger to rise starts as a wound, an ache to escape embarrassment, before it ever becomes a dream. Then the world tilts when Pip is summoned to Satis house, the decaying mansion of Miss Havisham. Inside, time has stopped, curtains drawn, air stale, clocks halted, and a wedding feast rotting on the table. Miss Havisham, jilted on her wedding day, has turned heartbreak into a shrine. The house becomes a symbol of emotional decay. What happens when grief is worshipped instead of endured? Satis house is grief made physical, a place where pain is preserved until it turns poisonous. And there is Estella, beautiful, cold, trained like a blade. She mocks Pip's boots and hands and makes him feel suddenly, painfully small. Pip mistakes humiliation for destiny. He believes that to be loved, by her, by life, he must become someone else. Dickens makes this moment a hinge. The story of class aspiration starts as a story of romantic obsession. Pip doesn't just fall for Estella, he falls for what she seems to prove about his worth. Pip leaves Satis house changed, not richer but rawer. Joe's forge, once comforting, begins to feel like a cage. Pip's feelings toward Joe become complicated, love tangled with embarrassment, and Dickens shows how class isn't only money, it's an idea that can poison affection. Pip starts measuring himself with someone else's ruler, and it never ends well. That new measuring stick is the real trap, because it makes Pip ashamed of the people who actually love him. Years pass. Pip is apprenticed to Joe, and he tries, honestly tries, to be dutiful. Yet the dream of Estella and the glitter of gentleman a life won't loosen its grip. The forge, with its honest heat, symbolizes steady integrity. Pip sees it as smoke-stained limitation. This is Dickens at his sharpest, how easily we learn to despise the very places that kept us alive. The forge stands for honest life, and Pip's growing dislike of it shows how far his values have started to drift. A burst of violence marks another turning. Mrs. Joe is attacked and left permanently damaged. The household shifts. Joe's gentleness becomes even more heroic as he cares for her. Into their home comes Biddy, smart, kind, quietly perceptive, offering a different kind of love, practical, sincere, healing. But Pip's eyes remain fixed on a colder star. Biddy is Dickens quietly putting the right path in the room, and showing Pip walk past it. Then, suddenly, Great Expectations arrive like a letter from fate. A lawyer named Jaggers announces that Pip has an unknown benefactor and will be funded to become a gentleman in London. Pip is stunned, thrilled, and instantly convinced the money is connected to Miss Havisham, and that it is all leading to Estella. Dickens lets us feel the intoxication of that belief, the seduction of a story we tell ourselves because it flatters our longing. Pip grabs the most romantic explanation because it makes his desire feel ordained instead of merely desperate. Pip goes to London and meets the machinery of power, Jaggers, stern and brilliant, Wemmick, his clerk, who lives two separate lives, hard practicality at work, tender or domestic happiness at home. London is not romantic, it's transactional. Pip learns the manners of the city, but he also learns how easily people become performances when status is the audience. In London, Pip starts living as if life is an audition, and he can't relax unless someone is impressed. He befriends Herbert Pocket, open-hearted and sensible, and together they spend money as if it can buy identity. Pip buys clothes, habits, a way of standing in a room. Yet the more of a gentleman he becomes, the more he feels hollow, because he's building himself from the outside in. Dickens quietly warns, if your worth depends on being seen, you'll always be starving. The emptiness is the point. Pip's new life is polished, but it doesn't feed his spirit. Pip returns to Satie's house and finds Miss Havisham still cultivating her ruin like a garden. Estella is there too, more dazzling, more unreachable. Miss Havisham practically encourages Pip's hope, letting him believe he's being shaped for Estella, as if hope were a leash. The symbolism is blunt and brilliant. In that house of stopped clocks, Pip's future is being manipulated by someone who refuses to move past her own past. Miss Havisham keeps Pip waiting the way her clocks keep time waiting, so he can't move on, either. Underneath, another story runs like an underground river, Miss Havisham's schemes, Jagger's professional secrets, the strange case of Molly, and the way different lives seem to echo each other. Dickens loves these mirrored patterns because they show how society is a web, not a ladder. Everyone is tied to everyone, whether they know it or not. Those echoes are Dickens' reminder that private choices create public consequences, and no one escapes the net. Pip's pride grows alongside his debt. He neglects Joe. He begins to treat Biddy like an afterthought. When Joe visits London, awkward in his Sunday best, Pip is ashamed of the man who loves him most. It's one of the novel's most painful truths: when we chase and imagine better, we can become uglier than what we're running from. Dickens makes the shame sting here because it's not just rude, it's betrayal of the story's purest goodness. Estella's destiny sharpens, she is courted, she is displayed, she is used. She tells Pip, almost gently, that she has no heart, she was raised that way. Dickens makes her tragic, not merely cruel. Estella is a creation, a weapon forged by Miss Havisham's bitterness. Love in this book is often something inflicted, and Estella is its sharpest example. Estella's coldness isn't a personality quirk, it's the visible scar of someone else's vengeance. Then comes the midnight twist that cracks Pip's entire worldview. A man appears in Pip's rooms, a rough figure with weathered hands, revealing himself as the escaped convict from the marsh, Dable Magwitch. He is Pip's benefactor. Not Miss Havisham. Not romance. Not fate with a pretty face. Pip's expectations were bought with a criminal sweat and risk, paid for out of gratitude and fierce, almost parental devotion. The shock isn't just who paid, it's that Pip's gentle life rests on the sacrifice of someone he was trained to despise. Pip is horrified, not because Magwitch is monstrous, but because the truth destroys the story Pip preferred. His money, his status, his fantasy of becoming worthy for Estella, it all comes from the man society says is worthless. Dickens flips the class script: the gentleman has been built by the generosity of a convict. Pip's snobbery is exposed, and so is society's. Dickens is snapping the mask off respectability, showing it can be funded by love while hiding behind contempt. Magwitch's presence becomes a moral test. Pip sees his benefactor not as a symbol but as a human, vulnerable, hunted, proud. Dickens draws the theme into focus: redemption doesn't always look respectable. Pip begins, painfully, to grow up, not into a gentleman, but into someone capable of loyalty and compassion when it costs him something. Pip's transformation finally starts when he can no longer pretend virtue comes with clean hands. Danger closes in. Magwitch is wanted, and Pip, once terrified of the convict, now becomes his protector. In the shadows of London's legal and social system, Pip learns what real courage is, not being admired, but doing right when it's inconvenient and frightening. The symbolism shifts too. The fog that once represented Pip's moral confusion becomes the cover under which he finally acts with clarity. It's the first time Pip chooses action over image, and Dickens treats that choice like a moral sunrise. As Pip investigates Magwitch's past, the web tightens. Magwitch's old enemy, the refined and venomous Compeyson, is revealed as the gentleman criminal, proof that Polish can hide rot. Even more devastating, Estella's origins are exposed. She is Magwitch's daughter, and her mother is Molly, Jagger's silent housekeeper. Dickens lands a brutal point: class and virtue are not the same thing, and blood doesn't grant moral superiority. With one reveal, Dickens collapses the whole fantasy that better breeding equals better soul. Pip returns to Miss Havisham, and the stopped clock world begins to crack. He confronts her, and she finally feels the weight of what she's done. In a moment of searing symbolism, fire consumes her, the decayed wedding world igniting into literal flames. It's as if Dickens is saying, obsession eventually burns everything it touches, including the one who holds it closest. That fire turns her lifelong frozen sorrow into the one thing it always needed to become: change. The attempt to escape with Magwitch becomes the novel's grim climax: pursuit, betrayal, and a desperate struggle by the river. Magwitch is captured and mortally injured. His fortune is lost. The expectations evaporate like mist. But something else remains, something Pip never bought in London: gratitude. Pip stays with Magwitch, comforts him, and tells him that his daughter, Estella, lives and is beautiful. In Magwitch's final moments, that knowledge is a kind of salvation. Here Dickens makes it plain: the richest thing in the story is not money, but mercy given at the end. Pip's story ends not in triumphant wealth but in humbled clarity. He falls ill, Joe returns and pays his debts, forgiving him without speeches, the purest symbol of unconditional love in the book. Pip learns that the forge he once fled was never a prison, it was a home. And Estella, changed by suffering, returns as a figure no longer purely cold. Depending on the ending you meet, the final note is either cautious reunion or quiet acceptance, but the lesson is the same: great expectations built on vanity collapse, while the ones built on human kindness endure. Dickens closes the circle: the marsh, the fog, the fire, the stopped clocks, each symbol pointing to one hard-won truth: becoming better is not a rise in class, but a rise in conscience. If you learned something today, consider giving the video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more content. We hope to catch you in the next video.